Black teen maid humiliated at will, reading until they realized she inherited everything. They laughed the moment she walked in, whispers of maid's daughter and charity case echoing off marble walls. 17-year-old Aisha Thompson stood perfectly still as Charles Sterling sneered, "Who let the help into our private reading?" Every icy glare told her she didn't belong, but they didn't know the will held a secret that would shatter their world. The girl they humiliated would inherit everything, 51% of the Sterling empire, every manor and millions in trust. In less than a minute, power would shift, and the privileged would learn what happens when the underestimated claim their rightful place. Ready for a reckoning? Subscribe now and hit that like button. Every second counts. Leave a comment if you're in her corner. What comes next will shatter everything you thought you knew about privilege and power. In just moments, you'll watch a teenager seize control, rewrite the rules, and claim what's rightfully hers. Don't blink. This is one you have to see. 17-year-old Aisha Thompson wakes before dawn each morning to help her mother clean the city's grandest estates. She slides into her worn sneakers, ties back her natural curls, and steels herself for another day of invisible labor. While dusting crystal chandeliers and polishing marble foyers, she dreams in whispers of legal textbooks and courtroom triumphs, books she borrows from the public library under the glow of a single lamp. Her mother, Marta, battles a chronic illness, and every dollar Aisha earns buys medicine and hope. On the other side of town, the Sterling family prepares for their patriarch's will reading in the towering glass and steel Sterling Tower. Charles Sterling, the nephew and self-appointed heir, adjusts his bespoke suit with a smirk. He commands attention with a clipped laugh and a gaze that dismisses anyone who isn't born to privilege. His sister Evelyn, draped in designer silk, rolls her eyes at the prospect of another charity stunt from their late uncle. Richard, the eldest, oversees the family's vast holdings and prides himself on ruthless boardroom tactics. They share a single assumption that a brown-skinned girl with a mop of curly hair could never deserve their empire. For years, Aisha has passed through the Sterling lobby, unnoticed vacuum in hand, echoing through marble halls as she chases shadows. She has never felt safe among these glaring chandeliers or heard a kind word from the Sterling clan. Yet each insult murmurs of maid's daughter, condescending half-smiles. The abrupt flinch when she dared to enter without invitation has only fueled her resolve. Today she'll cross the threshold one last time, not as an employee, but as the unexpected centerpiece of a legal bombshell. Unbeknownst to Charles, Evelyn and Richard, Aisha has shared late-night conversations with their dying uncle Jonathan Sterling, a man who saw her brilliance, her compassion, and her hunger for justice. He recorded each word and carefully scripted a reversal of fate more explosive than any boardroom coup. As Aisha steps into the hushed conference room, she carries a single envelope, an invitation jarringly simple in its white paper, her name scrawled in elegant copperplate. The Sterling siblings glance at each other, jaws tight. They assume she's here to make a plea for charity, to slump quietly into the corner, expecting crumbs of sympathy. They have no idea she holds the key to 51% of their fortune. This is more than inheritance, it's a reckoning. Aisha Thompson, the girl they mocked, is about to rewrite the rules of power. In the next 30 minutes, she will transform humiliation into an unbreakable advantage, expose the family's hidden cruelties, and ignite a revolution in wealth and responsibility. When the gavel lands and the will is read, the Sterling legacy will fracture, and a new era will begin, led by the one person they never saw coming. They surrounded her like predators, circling wounded prey. Charles Sterling leaned forward, voice low and venomous. "You really think you belong here, girl?" His question dropped like a hammer against Aisha's spine. Evelyn Sterling laughed, the high-pitched sound ricocheting off the glass walls. Must be another one of Uncle Jonathan's pity games come to beg for scraps. Richard Sterling rolled his eyes, folding his arms to display the cufflinks that cost more than Aisha's monthly wages. He dismissed her with a flick of his hand, as if swatting away a bothersome insect. Every glare, every whispered insult pushed Aisha's heart closer to the breaking point. She stood, rigid jaw, clenched the envelope in her hand, sweating her fingerprints. Her mind raced back to the countless nights poring over law textbooks, by a single desk lamp, dreaming of justice as her mother's cough echoed down cold hospital corridors. Each snipe now felt like a personal blow, the suggestion that she was nothing more than a charity case, the murmurs of Maid's daughter that trailed her like a shadow. Charles plucked a champagne flute from a passing waiter and pointed it at her. "Tell me, Aisha Thompson, how many mansions have you cleaned? How many silver trays have you buffed?" The room erupted in forced laughter. Evelyn whispered something about scavenging for favors, and Richard muttered, "She's just hungry for attention." Even the junior lawyers exchanged smirks, leaning in to catch every humiliating whisper. But then something shifted in the air. A faint smile ghosted across Aisha's lips. She had come prepared for their cruelty. The moment Charles's gaze flicked away, she tightened her grip on the envelope. Her pulse steadied, her breathing cooled. She was no longer the invisible servant brushing past their designer shoes. She was the storm gathering on the horizon, the reckoning they had invited. Richard snarled, "I don't know why we're wasting time on this," before the lawyer's voice cut through the din. "Please, let's maintain order." Thomas Blake, Jonathan Sterling's longtime counsel, stepped forward, pale but resolute. The family fell silent, all eyes darting to him. In his hand glinted a slim remote control. Without another word, he pressed a button. A low hum filled the room as the hidden screen flickered to life. Evelyn gasped, clutching her pearls. Charles nearly toppled his chair. On the screen, Jonathan Sterling's frail figure appeared seated at a polished oak desk. His gravelly voice broke the hush. "Before we proceed, I have a question for you. Can anyone here name the daughter of my friend, Marta Thompson?" The question struck like a sledgehammer. Faces drained of color. In that pregnant pause, Aisha felt the power shift from the bullies to the accused. She watched Charles's smug facade crack. Evelyn looked frantic, fingertips trembling on her phone as she fumbled for a tweet. Richard's mouth opened and closed, searching for a retort. But no one spoke. On the screen, Jonathan continued. "You have treated her and every employee in this house as inconsequential, disposable. Yet she alone has the courage to speak truth to power." With each word, the Sterling siblings felt their carefully cultivated entitlement begin to unravel. Aisha did not gloat. She simply stood tall, letting the silence do the work. As the video ended, Thomas Blake's voice filled the void. "The conditions of Mr. Sterling's will require that we review these matters before distributing his estate." He turned the remote toward the Sterling family. "Are we ready to proceed?" Charles's knuckles whitened around his glass. Evelyn's lips quivered. Richard's jaw throbbed with suppressed anger. They had aimed to humiliate a maid's daughter, but instead had exposed their own cruelty to the man who mattered most. The legal reading that followed would strip away the last veneer of their privilege and reveal Aisha Thompson as the rightful heir to everything they coveted. And all because they overlooked the one person who saw them clearly, who refused to bow to their disdain. In this room where power had once been absolute, the underdog's silent defiance now roared louder than any insult. The conflict had escalated beyond petty humiliation to a reckoning that would redefine every life in that glass tower. That night, Aisha slipped into the empty conference room, heart pounding, but mind razor sharp. In her hand was a slim USB drive, stamped with her uncle's distinctive seal, his final act of defiance. Across the polished table sat Thomas Blake, Jonathan Sterling's longtime counsel, his face grave as he inserted the drive into the hidden media console. On the wall, the screen flickered to life with grainy footage of Charles Sterling berating a trembling sous chef for a pancake burnt at the edges. Evelyn Sterling laughing as she slashed a maid's wages mid-shift. Richard Sterling mocking a driver's accent until tears glistened in the man's eyes. Each clip was only a few seconds long, yet every frame burned a permanent record of cruelty into the family's legacy. Aisha watched Thomas pause the sequence after the fifth clip. He looked at her, voice hushed but firm. "Your uncle left explicit instructions. Show these before the will reading." He wanted every last drop of their arrogance exposed. The lawyer's hand hovered over the remote. "You understand the impact this will have?" She nodded, fighting back a surge of relief and righteous fury. For years, she had scrubbed the marble floors and dusted the silver platters of these people, each insult chiseling away at her pride. Now she held the hammer. Thomas clicked forward. The footage shifted to a private video of Jonathan Sterling himself, frail but undiminished in conviction. My family has never known compassion or humility. They see servants as invisible, and they will learn how quickly invisibility can be turned into power. Aisha listened to her uncle's voice echo through the speakers, his tone heavy with sorrow and determination. As the final clip dissolved, Thomas handed her a sealed envelope. Its ivory paper glowed in the low lamplight. "This is the official notification of your inheritance," he said. 51% of Sterling Holdings, the family mansion, and $20 million in trusts. But there's more. Your uncle stipulated that you enact a series of measures within the first 24 hours. Her pulse quickened. What measures? Thomas leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. First, you must publicly transfer all Sterling properties, Appendix A slum housing developments acquired through deceptive land grabs, back to the original residents free of charge. Second, you will convene a new board comprising former employees who were wronged by the Sterlings. Third, you will establish a profit-sharing mandate that ensures every employee from janitor to executive receives equitable dividends. Failing to act within a day invalidates the entire will. Aisha's breath caught. This was bigger than personal revenge. It was a complete dismantling of the old order. She closed her eyes and pictured her mother Marta, her gaunt frame finally supported by proper medical care. She thought of every quiet sacrifice she had made to read law books by candlelight, dreaming of justice. This was the culmination. She opened her eyes, resolve hardening like steel. "I'll do it," she said. "But I need your help to ensure each condition is executed flawlessly. We cannot afford a single legal misstep." Thomas nodded. "I've prepared the documentation. The transfers, the board appointments, the profit-sharing charter, they're all ready. I'll cue you in the hearing room. The moment your uncle's video ends, you hold up that envelope and read the summary aloud. Then we start the clock." Aisha slid the envelope into her coat pocket. Outside, the city lights glittered like a sea of indifferent stars. Within 24 hours, those same lights would frame a world transformed by her uncle's last will. The next morning, she entered Sterling Tower not as a servant, but as the heir apparent. She passed the stunned security guard with a nod. The family was already assembled in the glass-walled boardroom, Charles in his tailored suit, Evelyn draped in silk scarves, Richard adjusting his cufflinks with practiced precision. As Thomas activated the video feed, Aisha stood at attention. When her uncle's voice faded, she stepped forward. Unfolding the envelope, she declared in a clear, resonant tone, "By the authority vested in me by Jonathan Sterling's final will, I hereby assume 51% control of Sterling Holdings. Effective immediately, I transfer all Appendix A properties back to their rightful owners, establish a new board of former employees, and enact a profit-sharing plan for every member of this company. These measures must be implemented within the next 24 hours, or the will is null and void." A hush fell. Charles lunged forward, anger blazing in his eyes, only to halt when Thomas raised a hand. Evelyn gripped her pearls, shock damming her breath. Richard's face turned ashen as he realized the legal trap was sealed. Aisha felt a quiet triumph settle in her chest. This was the turning point, the exact moment when humiliation inverted into authority, when the underdog seized the reins and redefined justice. The family's empire, built on silenced voices and hidden abuses, would now be reshaped by the very people they had oppressed. As Thomas guided her out of the room, Aisha allowed herself a moment of relief. The plan was in motion, the wheels of transformation already churning. In 24 hours, a new Sterling legacy would be born, one of restitution, equity, and undeniable power wielded by the once invisible. The screen went dark for a beat, and then Thomas Blake's voice cut through the silence, proceeding now with the terms of Mr. Sterling's final will. Aisha inhaled, steeled herself, and pressed play on the next USB segment. Instantly, the hushed boardroom was flooded with flashing images, deeds, stamped Appendix A next to aerial shots of cramped, dilapidated row houses. A narrator, Jonathan Sterling's measured tone, laid out the first clause: all properties in Appendix A are to be transferred without cost to to the residents who have lived there for generations. Aisha watched Charles Sterling's smug expression morph into disbelief as Evelyn gasped, clutching her pearls. Before they could react, the next clip rolled former employees, once dismissed for organizing a union, stepping forward to claim seats on the newly constituted board of Sterling Holdings. A list of names, scrolled handwritten endorsements from Jonathan himself, attested to each person's qualifications and experience. Aisha felt a surge of righteous vindication. These were the faces she had polished shoes alongside the voices she had hushed in the servants' corridor. Now, they would carry corporate weight. The third video segment exploded on screen, a graphic presentation of profit-sharing projections. Charts demonstrated how a modest dividend, just 5% of annual net income, would empower every housekeeper, chauffeur, receptionist, and intern to share directly in the company's growth. Thomas Blake's voiceover explained, within 24 hours a profit-sharing charter must be enacted. Failure to ratify this plan by tomorrow midnight renders the will void. Murmurs erupted in the room. Richard Sterling leapt up, eyes gleaming with fury. "This is extortion," he spat, but Blake's steady gaze silenced him. Evelyn's manicured nails tapped anxiety on the glass table as she stared at her reflection in the screen. Then came the pièce de résistance, a private message from Jonathan to his heirs. On camera, he spoke directly to Charles Evelyn, and Richard, his voice raw. "You built this empire by trampling over the powerless, but you will learn the value of every life you once dismissed." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle like a brick in their chests. "Execute these terms or relinquish your shares entirely. The clock is running." Aisha exhaled, every nerve electric. This was not petty revenge, it was systemic upheaval. As the final frame froze on Jonathan's solemn face, she pressed stop and rose to her feet. Her voice, calm but resolute, echoed in the suddenly cavernous room. "By the authority vested in me, I hereby declare the immediate transfer of all Appendixa properties to their rightful inhabitants. I appoint the following individuals to the Sterling Holdings Board: Rosa Delgado, former head housekeeper; Marcus Liu, ex-chauffeur; Priya Singh, once dismissed receptionist; and 4 others who stood up when we all stood down. Finally, I enact the profit-sharing charter as stipulated. These measures must be implemented within 24 hours, no exceptions." A stunned silence followed. Then Charles's chair scraped violently against marble tile as he lunged forward, face crimson. "You can't do this. You're not even 21, he roared. Evelyn sprang to her feet, voice shaking. "This is illegal manipulation of a dying man." But Richard's outburst was cut short by the soft click of Blake's remote. The screen blinked one last time, revealing a single frame, the timestamp of Jonathan's signature on the will, legally binding and irrevocable. 2 security officers slipped in behind the Sterling trio, standing at rigid attention. Aisha watched as Charles's shoulders sagged, Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, Richard's jaw locked in helpless rage. The empire they had assumed would pass untouched now lay in ruins before them, replaced by a new order built on restitution and shared prosperity. As murmurs of panic spread, calls to legal counsel, frantic texts to external attorneys, Aisha lowered her gaze. There was no triumph in her posture, only quiet determination. She had turned every insult thrown her way into ammunition, every sneer into a stepping stone. The maid's daughter was now the architect of their downfall and the prophet of a fairer future. In the hallway outside, former employees pressed against the glass, their faces alight with stunned joy. Aisha paused at the threshold, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Today, she had wielded power as ruthlessly as she had been scorned, but with a purpose far greater than vengeance. She would rebuild this empire from the ground up, brick by brick, heart by heart. Behind her, the Sterlings regrouped, shouting plans for court challenges and media spin. She barely heard them. Her vision stretched beyond these walls to every community that would reclaim stolen land, every worker who would finally share in the wealth they helped create. The clock was ticking on Jonathan's will, but her movement had just begun. A stunned hush fell over Sterling Tower as word spread. The transfers were real. the board appointments official, the profit-sharing charter enacted. Within hours, Rosa Delgado, once a housekeeper, walked into the penthouse suite and signed off on deed transfers, tears streaming as she reclaimed her childhood home. Marcus Liu, the ex-chauffeur, watched in disbelief as his former employer's car keys were handed to a local clinic in need of patient transport. Priya Singh, once dismissed for organizing co-workers, sat at the head of the board table, her voice steady as she outlined the new equity plan to stunned executives. News outlets exploded with headlines. Maid's daughter overthrows dynasty. Sterling Empire reborn through justice underestimated teen sparks. Corporate revolution. Social media feeds flooded with clips of employees cheering outside headquarters, hugging one another, sharing stories of lives upended and dignity restored. Charles Sterling's public statement, hastily drafted, blamed questionable legal tactics and vowed court battles. It was buried beneath the outpouring of support for Aisha on every platform. Inside the boardroom, Evelyn Sterling sank into a chair, clutching her pearls, as the reality set in her inheritance had become reparation. Richard Sterling stormed into the adjacent offices, slamming doors and shouting at his legal team, but found no solace. Binding contracts and notarized transfers blocked every challenge. Their peers in high finance whispered about the unprecedented upheaval, speculating whether any dynasty could survive such a radical recalibration of power. Meanwhile, former residents of the slum neighborhoods celebrated in the streets, dancing beneath banners, reading "Our Land, Our Lives," and "Sterling No More, Sterling Equity." Community leaders handed Aisha hand-painted thank you signs. Children ran alongside her chanting "Justice for All" in boardroom corridors, now plastered with local artwork. Productivity soared 15% in the first quarter, surprising even the most skeptical analysts who had predicted chaos. Back in the Sterling family's private wing, tension turned to broken resolve. Evelyn wept for her lost luxury. Charles's bespoke suit hung unworn. Richard's threats dissolved into desperate pleas for reinstatement. But Aisha refused to negotiate. She offered pro bono legal clinics for their retraining diversity workshops led by Dr. Naomi Carter and community service placements to rebuild empathy. Conditions they grudgingly accepted for every refusal meant public trials and further exposure. By sundown, the Sterlings were absent from their own company's gala celebration. Instead, Aisha stood before a crowd of employees and investors, her voice ringing clear. Tonight we celebrate not just a transfer of wealth, but the reclamation of human dignity. We've shown that true power lies not in inheritance, but in service. Together we'll build an empire that honors every hand that built it. And as fireworks lit the skyline, the Sterling legacy was reborn, not as a monument to privilege, but as a beacon of collective empowerment. The world watched in awe, knowing that when the underestimated rise, they can reshape history itself. Power isn't a trophy to be hoarded, it's a responsibility to be wielded wisely. Aisha's rise shows that true leadership emerges not from birthright, but from empathy, resilience, and vision. She transformed every slight into fuel for justice, proving that the underestimated often carry the greatest capacity for change. First, notice how Aisha never sought mere revenge. She rejected the simple satisfaction of watching her oppressors fall. Instead, she crafted a blueprint for systemic repair, returning stolen land, elevating formerly silenced voices onto the board, and sharing profits with those who built the empire. That choice shifted the narrative from personal triumph to collective empowerment. Second, consider the power of documentation. Jonathan Sterling's foresight in recording cruelty ensured accountability. In an age where reputation is currency, exposing hidden abuses can dismantle entrenched privilege. For organizations and individuals alike, transparency and data-driven oversight are the antidote to unchecked authority. Third, remember that restitution heals deeper wounds than punishment. Aisha's insistence on reparations and inclusion created allies out of former adversaries. Charles, Evelyn, and Richard, once blinded by entitlement, were offered paths to redemption if only they humbled themselves. True transformation happens when oppressors confront their legacy and choose service over status. Finally, the story teaches that lasting impact requires sustainable structures. The profit-sharing charter and community land transfers aren't one-off gestures. They're enduring mechanisms that realign incentives and rebuild trust. Whether in corporations or communities, embedding equity into governance prevents future abuses and ensures prosperity reaches every level. In the end, Aisha Thompson's revolution wasn't a violent overthrow, but a strategic re-engineering of power. It reminds us that the greatest legacy one can leave is not wealth amassed, but dignity restored and opportunity expanded. When leadership is grounded in compassion and accountability, even the most entrenched empires can be reborn as engines of fairness and hope. Aisha Thompson stands beneath the Sterling Tower, lights her silhouette framed by banners celebrating justice over privilege. Tonight marks more than the end of one story, it's the beginning of countless others. If a 17-year-old maid's daughter can dismantle an empire built on silent abuse, imagine what happens when all of us reclaim our voices and demand accountability. So here's your challenge. Look around at the systems you encounter, workplaces, schools, communities, and ask whether power serves everyone or just a chosen few. Share your own stories of unexpected triumph in the comments. Hit subscribe to follow Aisha's ongoing journey as she expands the Eduardo Sterling Institute for Social Equity. Like this video to stand with those who refuse to accept the status quo. Because real change isn't a spectacle, it's a movement. Every subscription, every share turns a spotlight on hidden injustices and reminds the world that when the underestimated rise, nothing can hold them back. Join us and let's turn humiliation into hope, one story at a time.